April 26, 1986. In the heart of the Soviet Union, a routine safety test was about to begin at a nuclear power plant. The workers inside believed they were carrying out a standard procedure. Nothing seemed unusual. But within hours, a series of mistakes, design flaws, and poor decisions would trigger the worst nuclear disaster in human history. An explosion would rip apart a nuclear reactor. A deadly cloud of radiation would spread across Europe. Entire towns would be abandoned forever. And thousands of people would pay the price. More than 3 decades later, the name Chernobyl still represents one of humanity's greatest technological disasters. This is the true story of the Chernobyl disaster. To understand what happened at Chernobyl, we first need to go back to the Soviet Union in the 1970s. At the time, the Soviet Union was one of the most powerful nations on Earth. Its leaders wanted to prove that socialism could compete with the West in science, technology, and industry. Electricity was essential for this goal. Factories, cities, and military facilities all needed enormous amounts of power. To meet this demand, the Soviet government invested heavily in nuclear energy. Nuclear power plants could produce huge amounts of electricity without burning coal or oil. One of these plants would become known around the world for all the wrong reasons. The Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. Despite its name, the plant was not actually located in the city of Chernobyl. Instead, it was built near a newly created city called Pripyat. Pripyat was designed specifically for the workers of the power plant and their families. Modern apartment buildings, schools, hospitals, parks, and shops were built there. By the mid-1980s, nearly 50,000 people lived in Pripyat. Most residents were young families. Life seemed comfortable. The city was clean, modern, and prosperous. Many people considered it one of the best places to live in the Soviet Union. No one could imagine that it would soon become a ghost town. The Chernobyl plant contained 4 nuclear reactors. A 5th and 6th reactor were still under construction. The reactor involved in the disaster was Reactor Number 4. Inside the reactor, nuclear fuel generated enormous amounts of heat. That heat was used to create steam. The steam turned giant turbines that produced electricity. It was a powerful system. But it had a serious weakness. The reactor design, known as the RBMK reactor, contained flaws that were not fully understood by many operators. Even worse, some of these flaws were kept secret. The Soviet government believed the reactors were safe. As a result, workers often lacked complete information about the dangers they faced. For years, the plant operated without a major accident. Everything appeared normal. But beneath the surface, a disaster was waiting to happen. On April 25, 1986, engineers prepared for an important experiment. They wanted to know whether the reactor's turbines could continue producing enough electricity during an emergency shutdown. If outside power was lost, cooling systems needed electricity until backup generators started. The test was designed to answer this question. At first, everything seemed routine. Operators began reducing reactor power. But unexpected delays disrupted the schedule. The test was postponed for several hours. This delay meant that the night shift would have to complete the experiment. Unfortunately, many of the most experienced workers had already gone home. The team now handling the test had less experience with the procedure. As the night continued, reactor power dropped much lower than planned. The operators tried to increase power again. To do this, they disabled several important safety systems. At the time, they believed they were solving a technical problem. In reality, they were creating the perfect conditions for disaster. It was now 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986. The test was finally underway. Inside Reactor Number 4, conditions were becoming increasingly unstable. Most of the operators did not realize how dangerous the situation had become. Control rods were supposed to regulate the nuclear reaction. But too many of them had been removed. Safety systems had been turned off. The reactor was operating far outside safe limits. Then, the operators decided to shut the reactor down completely. One worker pressed the emergency shutdown button. Known as AZ-5, this button was designed to stop the nuclear reaction immediately. Instead, something unexpected happened. Because of a flaw in the reactor's design, the shutdown process actually increased power for a few critical seconds. The reactor's power surged violently. Within moments, it reached levels hundreds of times greater than normal. Fuel rods shattered. Steam pressure built rapidly. Then came the first explosion. A massive blast ripped through the reactor building. Seconds later, a second explosion followed. The 2,000-ton reactor lid was thrown into the air. Concrete and steel were torn apart. Pieces of radioactive fuel scattered across the site. The reactor was now completely exposed. A fire erupted. For the first time in history, a nuclear reactor was burning in the open air. No one inside the control room could fully understand what had happened. Many workers refused to believe the reactor had exploded. It seemed impossible. But outside, the evidence was everywhere. The night sky glowed with strange blue light. Burning graphite covered the ground. An invisible radiation was pouring into the atmosphere. The disaster had begun. Minutes after the explosion, emergency calls were sent to local fire stations. Firefighters rushed toward the power plant. They were told there had been an electrical fire. No one warned them about the radiation. No one gave them protective equipment. No one explained the true danger. Among the first responders was a young firefighter named Vasily Ignatenko. Like many others, he believed he was responding to a normal industrial accident. When the firefighters arrived, they saw burning debris scattered across rooftops. Pieces of the reactor lay around them. Some of the material was so radioactive that standing near it for only a short time could deliver a deadly dose of radiation. The men had no idea. They climbed onto roofs and fought the flames. They worked courageously to stop the fire from spreading to other reactors. As they battled the blaze, many began experiencing strange symptoms. Some reported a metallic taste in their mouths. Others felt dizzy and weak. Their skin became red and painful. Still, they continued working. By sunrise, the fires had largely been brought under control. The firefighters had prevented an even greater catastrophe. But many had received fatal doses of radiation. Within days, several of them would be hospitalized. Many would never return home. Their sacrifice saved countless lives. Only a few kilometers away stood the city of Pripyat. Nearly 50,000 people slept peacefully through the night. Most residents knew nothing about the explosion. Children played outside the next morning. Families went shopping. Workers reported for duty. Life continued as normal. But invisible radiation was spreading across the city. It settled on buildings, streets, parks, and playgrounds. Many residents gathered on bridges and rooftops to watch the strange glow coming from the power plant. They had no idea they were exposing themselves to dangerous radiation. Hours passed. Then an entire day. Still, no evacuation order came. Soviet authorities hesitated. They feared panic. They hoped the situation could be controlled. Finally, more than 36 hours after the explosion, buses began arriving in Pripyat. Officials announced that residents would be temporarily evacuated. People were told to bring only essential items. Documents. A little food. Some clothing. They were assured they would return within a few days. Many left their homes exactly as they were. Meals remained on tables. Toys stayed in children's bedrooms. Photographs remained on shelves. No one realized they would never return. The evacuation of Pripyat became one of the largest emergency evacuations in history. Within hours, the city was empty. Today, Pripyat remains one of the most famous ghost towns on Earth. Schools still contain abandoned books. Ferris wheels stand frozen in time. Apartment buildings slowly decay. The city remains a haunting reminder of what happened at Chernobyl. While Pripyat was being evacuated, a far greater danger was spreading across Europe. Radiation cannot be seen. It cannot be smelled. It cannot be tasted. Yet it can be deadly. The explosion at Reactor Number 4 released massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Winds carried radioactive particles across vast distances. Belarus received some of the heaviest contamination. But the radioactive cloud did not stop there. It traveled across Ukraine, Russia, and much of Europe. For several days, Soviet authorities kept information limited. The world remained unaware of the true scale of the disaster. Then something unexpected happened. At a nuclear power plant in Sweden, workers detected unusually high radiation levels. At first, officials suspected a leak at their own facility. But investigations revealed the radiation was coming from somewhere else. Eventually, attention turned toward the Soviet Union. The truth could no longer be hidden. The world learned that a catastrophic nuclear accident had occurred at Chernobyl. As news spread, fear spread with it. People worried about contaminated food, water, and air. Governments began monitoring radiation levels across Europe. The disaster had become an international crisis. For those closest to the reactor, the consequences were even more severe. Many workers and emergency responders suffered from acute radiation syndrome. Their bodies had absorbed dangerous doses of radiation. Some experienced burns, nausea, and extreme weakness. Others lost their hair and suffered damage to internal organs. Doctors fought desperately to save lives. But radiation is a silent enemy. For many victims, the damage was already done. The Soviet government faced a terrifying challenge. The reactor was destroyed. Radiation levels remained dangerously high. And millions of people were at risk. To deal with the crisis, hundreds of thousands of workers were recruited. These men and women became known as the Liquidators. They came from across the Soviet Union. Soldiers. Engineers. Miners. Scientists. Construction workers. Many volunteered. Others were ordered to help. Their mission was simple to describe, but incredibly dangerous to perform. They had to clean up the disaster. One of the most dangerous jobs involved removing radioactive debris from rooftops around the reactor. Machines and robots were brought in first. But the radiation destroyed many of them. As a result, human workers had to do the job themselves. Men wearing protective suits would run onto highly radioactive rooftops. They had only seconds to work. A few shovels of debris. Then they had to run back. Every second mattered. Many liquidators knowingly risked their health to prevent an even larger catastrophe. Without their efforts, the consequences might have been far worse. Historians often describe them as heroes. Their work helped contain one of the most dangerous disasters in human history. Even after the fire was extinguished, the destroyed reactor remained a threat. The exposed core continued releasing radiation. Something had to be done. The Soviet government launched one of the largest engineering projects ever attempted. Workers began constructing a massive concrete and steel structure around the reactor. This structure became known as the sarcophagus. The goal was to seal the damaged reactor and prevent further contamination. Construction was extremely dangerous. Workers often operated in areas with high radiation levels. Despite the risks, the project moved forward at incredible speed. Within months, the reactor was enclosed. The sarcophagus reduced the immediate danger. But it was never intended to be permanent. Over time, the structure began to weaken. Cracks appeared. Engineers worried about future collapse. Decades later, an even larger protective structure was built over the original shelter. Known as the new safe confinement, it remains one of the largest movable structures ever built. Its purpose is to protect future generations from the dangers still hidden inside Reactor Number 4. More than 40 years have passed since the night of April 26, 1986. Yet the name Chernobyl continues to echo around the world. The disaster changed how nations viewed nuclear power. It exposed weaknesses in safety systems. It revealed the dangers of secrecy. And it demonstrated the devastating consequences of human error. Thousands of people were forced to leave their homes forever. Entire communities disappeared. Lives were changed in ways that can never be fully measured. Yet amid the tragedy, there were also stories of courage. Firefighters who rushed toward danger. Workers who risked their lives to contain the disaster. Scientists and engineers who struggled to protect future generations. Today, the abandoned city of Pripyat stands as a silent monument to the events of 1986. Empty schools. Silent streets. Rusting amusement rides. All frozen in time. They remind us of a night when a routine test became the world's worst nuclear disaster. A disaster that continues to teach lessons about technology, responsibility, and the cost of mistakes. Because while the reactor exploded in a single moment, the story of Chernobyl will be remembered for generations.